I don't feel inferior. I don't think inferior. I don't move inferior. My actions aren't inferior. Everything that I do is to the best of my ability. And when individuals think and react and move in such a method, racism will mean nothing to them.
Tell us a little bit about why you started the Crips years ago and what formulated you, because you were a violent man at that stage of your life, obviously.
It's something that I was taught to believe, that in order to get my point across, in order to prove my manhood, violence was the motif, the dominant theme.
And you were surrounded by it. You were sharing with me prior that, not only would adults pay for kids to fight, but I guess they'd light animals, birds on fire. And
Oh, yes. I mean, many things. As I stated in my memoir, Blue Age Black Redemption, adults, they were so competitive, everything was up for grabs. As I stated, they would, put gasoline on pigeons and see which one would fly the furthest. And whichever bird flew the furthest, that individual would win. I mean, everything was fighting. You'd find mothers and fathers fighting, boyfriends and girlfriends, criminals against criminals, pimps against their so-called prostitutes. And yes, we as youth were fighting one another, and I was nothing but 7 or 8 years old. We'd put on gloves and we'd fight one another until, whichever one fell down, the winner would get a couple of dollars, and so would the loser.
And when did you tell us about the transformation? I know you came from Louisiana, and I know you had concerns about protecting your mother in the beginning, but there was a point in which you became rather physically strong and more dominant and started using violence. When was that, and what triggered it?
Well, it was pretty much dealing with the neighboring gangs in the immediate area. You couldn't, at that time, talk to individuals because talk would be considered as a sign of weakness. So any type of powwows or truths were considered to be obsolete, passé, irrelevant. And I felt when I came from camp, I was 16 when I went there, and I was 17 when I left. But when I got back in society, I felt that the only way that these individuals could respect another person who wasn't into gang violence was to use violence against them. And so I got my friends together, my homeboys together, and we dwelled upon that.
And that's how you formed the Crips?
Yes, along with Raymond. Yes, well, that came later, but we were fighting other gangs prior to the development of the Crips. Now, years before.
This organization you started 34 years ago, the Crips, why has it grown to an international organization of such intensity and violence?
Because it's become more of a fad than anything nowadays, because all you have to do is look at the media, you look at the different periodicals, newspapers, books, etc., that glamorize that life. Rappers do it, books and periodicals do it. You have it to where the Crips have been sensationalized to the point to where individuals who don't even know the history of it are embracing it and getting killed over something they know absolutely nothing about. And it's not just throughout the United States, but it's also in Europe. It's also in South. We have a South African Crips, if you can believe that. I mean, it's everywhere. And it's become so attractive to destitute youth. To them, it's something that they can embrace, that they can feel a part of, whereas anywhere else, they're not getting those needs met.
What was the original purpose of the Crips when you had formed it 34 years ago?
Primarily to protect ourselves against the neighboring gangs, period. That's what it was for. But slowly but surely, we mutated or morphed into what gangs were. We ended up initiating the same thing that they did to individuals who weren't in the gangs, we started doing to them. Taking their money, taking their leather coats, making them change. So we reversed it on it. We did the same thing that they did to others, we did to them.
Now, Stan, tell us, what does redemption mean for you? What's the meaning of that word? Because it's the mantra of your life, and I know it's not something that happens once for you. It's something that you live every day. What does it really mean to you, and how does one create it? Because many people have lived things in their life that they perceive to be severe, even if others don't, or are severe. They've done horrible things. How does someone transform from who we were to who we are made to be at a spiritual and emotional and psychological level?
First and foremost, you're talking about something that requires not just discipline, but you have to want it. You have to have the willpower to go after it and get it. You really have to experience a sense of remorse and want to do something to help other people. And even prior to that, you have to, as I stated before to you, you have to develop a conscience. And for me, I developed a conscience through first educating myself. And by educating myself, I was able to start to reason. And through this form of reasoning, I was able to initiate a sense of common sense, knowing right from wrong. And because without a conscience, it doesn't make any difference. You can be highly educated, but you'll end up being an educated fool without conscience. Because there are plenty of individuals, not only behind bars, but individuals who are in society who are highly educated, and still they have no conscience. Therefore, without a conscience, they can do all sorts of nefarious things. They can rob and cheat and kill and initiate violence towards other people. And so, by me being able to develop a conscience, it helped me so that I can learn and understand that my life, what I perpetuated through the Crips, that legacy was something that I shouldn't have been doing and I didn't need to do, and all it was doing was hurting other people. So I realized that through my redemption, which is more than just making a transition, it's being able to reach out to other people and help others. And that's when I understood what redemption meant. It's beyond yourself. It's initiating selfless acts or selfless deeds towards helping others. My redemption, it never happened overnight. It took years, consistent years of worrying about what my friends would think, what my homeboys would think. Would they think I was weak, or was I turning soft, or something like that? I was worrying about that, and eventually I got to the point to where it didn't matter. When you're striving to do something that is positive, something, we're talking about a true cause. When you're striving for a true cause, it doesn't matter what the consequences are. Just as easily as I didn't worry about what the consequences were when I was in a gang, I definitely shouldn't worry about it when I get out. You people talking about how they worry about, well, you know, if you get in a gang and you can't get out, that's a myth. I demythologize that, just being alive and showing them that that's not so. You don't have to say that you're unable to get out of a gang because you're worrying about what your homeboys and friends will do to you, but yet you're not worried about what your enemies will do to you. So it's a contradiction. It's an oxymoron. You were tough enough, you had enough courage to get in a gang, but you don't have enough courage to get out? That's absurd. And then regards to my love for words, well, I was introduced to a dictionary by a chaplain, and a imam had given me a thesaurus. And instead of me using the methodology that Malcolm X had used in regards to learning words, in which he alphabetized them, going down the A's, the B's, I thought that was quite tedious. So what I would do is just randomly, pick words throughout the dictionary that caught my eye, and I would learn them. I started off with my own form of mnemonics, which means a technique for learning, for memorizing. So what I did was I'd get a sheet of paper, and I'd fold it in half, and I'd put the 10 words on one side, and on the other side I would put the definitions of each word. And I found out that I had an excellent ability to retain words. Hundreds of them, thousands of them. So I started off with 10 each day, and then eventually it increased to 20, 30, 40, 50, on up to 100. And I would have individuals out there on the yard that I knew test me, and each one would try to throw me. They'd throw out words and things like that, and which they thought that I would miss or misspell or misenunciate, or wouldn't remember the definition, the semantics of a word. But no, they weren't able to. It never happened. So I can say that I'm really proud of, being able to have a love for words, not only the English language, because I believe every child, regardless of their background, should have a command of the English language, especially living in this country. So in order to do so, they must know as many words as possible. They must study it and be able to articulate themselves clearly in order to get their point across. And I believe that they can do it. I did it, so I definitely believe that they can. There's an old adage that if your intellect is limited, you compensate through violence. I'm convinced that when an individual increases his intellect, that it automatically helps to thwart that type of aggression. It makes you think first. Because I noticed that when I started studying and, enhancing my vocabulary and towards redemption, I realized that the petty things that used to irk me, that I would respond to like I was a marionette, some puppet on a string, I realized that with common sense, I was able to avoid that, to not allow it to cause me to whimsically react impulsively. I no longer was able to do that. I stayed away from reacting like an animal. And when you think, it gives you the opportunity to, in a sense, outmaneuver things that will usually get you into trouble. And you think of ways that are productive in which to avoid it. Like I remember, many years ago, guards would come by and they would say something, and I would act a fool because of it. But then when they realized that they didn't have the weapon that they usually would have to manipulate me into acting a fool, then they left me alone. So, see, these are, boy, I'm telling you, the intellect is something else. That's why I stress over and over again to children that you must get an education. You must, because in order to compete in this world, you have to have an intellect. And yes, there are individuals who become millionaires behind some skill or behind some musical ability that they have, and that's fine and dandy. But even them, if they aren't educating themselves, they will lose that money.
You're absolutely right.
They will lose it because accountants and other individuals will come along. Look at what happened to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and other people. You know, I mean, they took all of their money. Red Fox, I mean, that man, he was rich, but what happened? He died broke. Sammy Davis Jr., broke. So you have to enhance your vocabulary, and you have not just your vocabulary, but you have to study. You want to know as much as you can about many topics. Because when you go out there and you're confronted with the world, it's not going to give you any slack. They're not going to have any pity. When you come to them, you must come right. You must have every tool at your disposal in order to achieve what you're striving for.
One of the first acts you did that got some individuals, and especially Barbara, to know you were authentic and this was not some game you were playing, that the reality of who you are was showing up, is she said that all the people in the prison said that when she was spending her money to help try and organize this meeting where you could talk to both Crips and Bloods and try to broker a peace, they also do it because you'd be risking your own life and you weren't telling the truth. Why'd you do it, and what did you say to these young men that got them to do something most would have thought was impossible?
Well, the fact that it was me who initiated the speech, that helped a lot. I didn't say anything that I'm sure that other political leaders and activists and other gang members were saying out there. It's the fact that it was me, a person who helped create the Crips with Raymond Washington. It was the fact they never thought that I, of all people, would sanction a truce between Crips and Bloods because, as you know, we were eternal enemies.
Yes.
And because of my stance throughout my life, people thought it was an impossibility for me to alter my life, to want to even see any type of truce, because in a sense it would be like an affront to the brainchild that myself and Raymond came up with. So that was a relief for them, because then they also knew that with that would come many other gang members, both sides. Right. Who would see, hey, if this man can do it of all people, why can't I?
That's the message I hope everyone gets as they hear your story. I guess there were about 35 people in the yard at the time you were doing the filming for this, that these Crips will be seeing later on, and I understand that there was a standing ovation when the Crips and Bloods came together at the end, which no one could believe or dream. Guys hugging each other. I mean, things you'd never picture in a million years.
Well, no, it was more than 35. It was close to 400.
400?
Yes, it was in an auditorium.
Wow.
It was doing a gang summit held by Hands Across Watts at that time. And they were happy. And, you know, of course, I didn't get a chance to know about the response until the next day. But I must admit I was elated, too. Because, look, I've been away from society for many years. And individuals in prison, of course, know who I am. And, you know, they hear my so-called exploits in here. But those society, they get little, you know, tales here and there. And they're not fully conversant about what's happening with me. So for me to do that, it just enhanced the effect. I was very glad to be able to do it.
And then the 35 men I was talking about were the ones in the yard witnessing you doing this. And I understand.
Well, no,
is that right? Did they convert?
No, they couldn't see anything.
Oh, interesting.
I never had a chance to see the speech itself played on TV at all.
Wow. Just
like I haven't been able to see Redemption the movie. They, you know, although FX had requested or asked San Quentin whether they allowed, they offered 5 or 6 DVDs of the movie Redemption, and they said no. Well, I mean, let's face it, I'm on death row, and the last thing that this piece would want to do is promote my reformation, my rehabilitation, my redemption. I mean, you yourself, I had stated to you before, you've never heard, coming from any death row, where they would praise or laud or extend kudos to any individual on death row for any type of positive behavior or project or what have you, because the demons makes it easier to facilitate matters for society itself.
So then you find yourself in prison, and prison for you seemed to be, everything you heard about it, I guess, was it was a place for gladiators. It was a place to prove you were a man.
Well, people who go to prison, who end up going to prison, will find out that it's a total antithesis of that. There's no such thing as a gladiator school. I was led to believe that you would come here, and if you had a problem with an individual, that you and him would fight mano a mano, one, head up, as we call it in the streets. But that's not so. Just like there are drive-by with 9mm and all other type of AK-47s and things of that nature out there in society, there are drive-bys in here with knives and picks and things of that nature where an individual will hit you and just take off running. So this is not a gladiator school. It's nothing like that. Person will get hurt thinking that.
As you told me, you said it's filled to a great extent with cowards.
Well, there's plenty of cowards here. There's plenty of informants here, and there's plenty of cowards and snitches in all prisons. This place isn't some recherche reality where it's just happening here on death row, but it's everywhere.
Why the black-on-black genocide? Why, you told me when we first met that you felt a great hatred for those within...
No, you're right. I remember that question. And the fact of the matter is, I was conditioned on self-hate. This self-hate is what made it possible for me to have no remorse whatsoever to attack a mirror image of myself, which is another black person. That's why individuals can go out there on a regular basis and just be totally indifferent about hurting or killing their own kind because of this self-hate. I've stated before, when you read the back of my memoir, I had stated how it was like for me and most individuals that I knew, it was like a cleansing effect that you feel that if you can just destroy that negative inferior image that is supposed to be a part of me, a part of us, and others, that it would somehow purge us. But of course, that's a delusional thought as well.
And where does that come from?
What, the self-hate?
They have the imagery of the African American as someone to hate, someone to fear.
Well, it comes from a conditioning, a belief that blacks in general are inferior people. I mean, let's face it, our ancestors were slaves in this country, and although there is no slavery, the denouement, the outcome, the results of slavery is a rifeness of racialism that portrays us as being subhuman, as being inferior, and as Caucasians being superior. And when you see these images of yourself in newspaper and periodicals, on TV and movies and things of that nature that depict blacks as being buffoons, as being vicious, as being obscure, as being 3/5 of a human being, as being illiterate, as being redolent, and any other negative connotation that you can come up with, you start to believe these things. You start to live these things, and it becomes so deeply inveterated in your life to where you see nothing but negatives about yourself, about your people. And you believe it and you live it. And that's exactly what happened with me. I was conditioned to believe that. That's why none of us had any problems about preying on another black person, preying on one another. Well, I believe in karma. And I believe that the reason why I'm here is because of many things that I've done untoward black people that I was never convicted of or never arrested for. I believe it was an accumulation of those things in which I'm here for, because the murders that I've been convicted of, I did not do. I'm not culpable for those.
Now, I want to point out you have apologized publicly about all the things you've done, including helping to create the Crips and the violence they brought on, and you've daily worked to make a difference in that area, but you've never apologized for these murders, and some, for that reason, think you deserve to die. Tell us about that.
Well, I find that to be somewhat a paradox. It's more of a contradiction, not on my part, but those who say those things. Because first and foremost, I believe that an apology or remorse in itself connotes guilt, which I'm not. In fact, it would be disingenuous on my part. It would be the sign of a coward to apologize just to save his or her life. And that's something I would not do. I mean, albeit I can empathize with any family who has lost a loved one. But honestly, I can't express remorse or make an apology for crimes I did not commit. To do so would be a cravenous act. You know, and the reason why I apologized to black people is because they are the ones that I committed atrocities against. I have no qualms about apologizing or to mea culpa to anyone who I've offended. Had I done those crimes, I would have no qualms about apologizing. But to do so would just fly in the face of my innocence. And I have too much integrity to lie about something like that and to apologize for something I did not do just to save my neck. That would be wrong. I say to you and to those who are listening that under any kind of in-depth analysis of my background, it would show that I was conditioned to prey upon, to hate, and to perpetuate violence against black people, not white folks, not Hispanic, or any other ethnicity. This is what I was conditioned to do. I was conditioned to, in order to survive, to prey upon drug dealers, black drug dealers, black pimps, black hustlers, and other criminal types. All of them were my prey. And for me to go out that realm was, it wasn't my MO. It wasn't my modus operandi. That wasn't something that I did. If I wanted to make money or get money, I would prey upon these so-called criminal types because of the simple fact. They could not go to the police. They could not. I mean, what are they going to say? Here's a drug dealer saying, hey, Stanley Tookie Williams robbed me last night and took my drugs and my money. No pimp can say that. No hustler can say that. No any type of criminal. They can't complain. These are things that we dealt with amongst ourselves. If they had a problem with it, then come for me. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Of course I do. And what makes so much sense is, why would you go outside the city and try and rob a convenience store for $75 or $200 and then kill people in cold blood when you can get thousands of dollars from a guy around the corner who can't go to the police and you have no risk?
And this is not only how I thought, but this is how the inner circle of Crips we thought. We preyed upon those who could not tell. We didn't go out and rob Joe's mother or Frank's mother or something like that. We didn't rob those places. I've never touched those places. No one can ever say or accuse me. There's been no allegations of me doing anything toward a church, a black church, or toward a black business or something like that. Once I realized where the money was and that it was almost an impossibility unless these people were hurt, seriously hurt, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That they could report me to the police.
What's interesting for those listening is there is, obviously we've done our research on this to be able to support and clarify things for the governor. The governor's perspective, according to some, had been that you've had a fair trial of your peers and that you were convicted by your peers and you've exhausted all appeals. But in reality, there was no physical evidence whatsoever at the scene that ties you to it. There's actually a bloody footprint and fingerprints that are not yours.
Correct.
You were in a situation where there was not one African-American on the jury. The gentleman who's the prosecutor has been sanctioned twice by the California Supreme Court
yes.
for racist approaches to what he's done, and he kept any black jurors from being on the team. And left out a very important point. There were no live witnesses to these two murders, or these four murders, these two incidents. The only people that have testified are individuals who, one was being investigated for a murder himself.
Exactly.
None of them, they claim they heard you bragging about this. They didn't witness this.
Yes. Even the so-called accomplices never saw me do anything.
That's right.
But yet they say that I told them this.
And they were given clemency, that they were let immunity by doing this. So they were able to avoid their own skins by claiming that the Crips committed these murders.
Well, of course, and because of my background, who would disbelieve it? I mean, I fit the bill. It was easy to throw these charges or allegations against me. No one would think that I didn't do it because of the fact of my despicable background. But let me say this about the problems with this particular case. I mean, the fact is not only those things that you mentioned, but I mean, it was a paradigm of blatant racism. We're talking about prosecutorial misconduct. We're talking about dirty cops. We're talking about IAC, ineffective assistance of counsel. We're talking about operatory evidence. We're talking about biased jury selection, which resulted in an all-white jury. And we're talking about also the misuse of jailhouse informant, and, of course, the illegal interrogation of witnesses, not to mention the involuntary drugging.
Playing this portion for certain for him. The question is, why should you live, and what would you like to say to him, sir?
Well, I understand that this is a precarious moment, Governor Schwarzenegger. In essence, I won't waste your time with the usual legal formalities of constitutional errors about the racism or about my innocence. I must say that admittedly, there's nothing special about me. I don't take myself seriously, but helping youth is more than a passion to me. It's my life. Undeniably, my past is atrocious, dishonorable, and unworthy of emulation by anyone. However, years of self-transition, redemption, and my faith enabled me to purge myself of those negative traits. I believe my dramatic change demonstrates to others that regardless of their wretched conditions, they too can change their lives for the better. Now, I don't put to be a role model or a mentor or a hero. I'm simply a messenger warning youth about the perils of the thug and criminal's lifestyle. You know, I remember reading somewhere that it's your intent, Schwarzenegger, to make California a better place. Well, I concur. It's my mission also to help make California a better place to live for its citizens. In short, I understand that my life is in your hands. And dare I say that I don't want to live just for the sake of living. I don't want to simply occupy space or live in an inertia. My desire is to continue to be active in being an active part of the solution. More importantly, I believe I bring more to the table than the physicality of my being. I bring forth a credible change through my empathetic words, my books, my website, my conference calls, and viable solutions. Akin to you, Governor, I too relied upon my indomitable determination to make the seemingly impossible possible. I need not tell you about the necessary discipline it requires to achieve. In conclusion, I would say that I'm convinced if I'm afforded a clemency or an indefinite stay, I'll continue to proliferate my positive message to all who will listen. Also, I propose that you, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, your staff, and I, if possible, can initiate an active youth project designed to address the social ills. I'm willing with anyone who has the best interest of the youth of today in society. And in ending, I say Amani, which is peace.
At this stage, tell me this, what is the purpose of your life? And that whatever time you have, what is the purpose? What do you think the purpose of life is for anyone?
Well, the purpose of life, I believe, for anyone is to reach out to their fellow man. And when I say man, I'm just using that as a generic term. I'm talking about both male and female. So it's to reach out to your fellow man. I see nothing of great importance than being able to reach out to one's fellow man and help them. Because without that, we know that violence will continue. That's why you have terrorists. That's why you have armies. That's why you have the police and things of that nature. Because everybody, it seems, are at one another's throats. And without this form of humanitarianism, this form of peace, these atrocious acts of suicide bombers, of senseless killings, gang warfare, dope warfare, and all of that type of madness will continue. I believe the greatest cause is to push forward and to struggle to help one's fellow man. I never would have thought I'd be saying that to you. To try to fight a pathology that is incapable of being resolved, it's a waste of time. In other words, what I'm saying is you can't spend your time worrying about a philosophy, because that's all it is. It's really a philosophical myth. It's not a reality. It's a reality when you start believing it and bringing it into fruition and making it tangible in one's own life. In order to battle racism is not to ignore it per se, but to evolve in a higher form, which makes racism, prejudice, being predilective and things of that nature, and bias, bigotry, which makes all of that obsolete. It makes it passé. You rise above it.
You become more than anything that could ever attack you or challenge you.
Exactly. If like now, I don't believe that I'm inferior to any other human being. I believe we're all, despite the fact that I'm sitting here in the cell, I believe that I am on a level playing field with any other human being. I believe that because of the fact that I don't feel inferior. I don't think inferior. I don't move inferior. My actions aren't inferior. Everything that I do is to the best of my ability. And when individuals think and react and move in such a method, racism will mean nothing to them.
How do you want to be remembered 50 years from now when you pass away? Not a few weeks ago.
I was an individual who made a tremendous change, not only in my life, but more importantly, in other people's life. I changed my own atrocious legacy to a legacy that could be respected, that could be emulated, and that could be appreciated.